Hello everybody, welcome to the very first episode of my Media Mirrors interview series, where I'll be speaking with members of the SPSG community regarding their experiences with minority representation in media. Alright, so for the people watching, please introduce yourself, and as well as if you're part of any marginalized groups.
My name is Moyer. I am the Director of Library and Media Services here at SPSG. I also teach computer science to the entire 9th and 10th grade, and I do not consider myself a member of any marginalized groups.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. So to start off, what kinds of TV shows do you watch? Do you have any favorites?
Yeah, so I wrote a lot of this down because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then I started finding out stuff about myself from the shows that popped up in my head right away. So some of my all-time favorite shows, I would say top two are probably The Office and Friends. Friends mostly because when I was in college and high school and my now wife and I were dating, that was sort of the show, whenever we didn't have anything to do, we would just sit down and watch. That was also back when DVDs of shows were really big. So we would just go through, and we still have all the DVDs of those and everything. So we would just, whenever we didn't have anything to do, we would just hang out and watch that show. So that was a big part of I think an important time of everybody's lives when they're starting to figure out who they are, things like that, starting careers. And then The Office as well. It's, I think a lot of people say it's one of the most rewatchable shows out there. It's actually gotten to the point now where if I need to fall asleep, I can put that on, and within 2 minutes I'm asleep. But that's not the only reason I still watch it now. I still think it's very funny. It's interesting, sort of going back and rewatching, especially the earlier episodes through the lens of us having this conversation, sort of had me sort of take a look at some of the things on the show. And I started thinking that show came out I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that, I think, when the first season came out, and thinking of, would that show be in the same sort of time slot on the same network that it is now, or that it was if they put it on now, and started asking those questions. And a lot of the shows that I went back, but I would say those are probably my top two. I do like a lot of silly comedy sitcom shows are probably my main wheelhouse, but now that you have all of these different streaming services and different shows available to you, I like really big in the sports documentaries, and also past historical events, war documentaries. World War II docs are real big for me. And I started thinking why do I like them? And I like the idea that you take this bigger story, but you can focus in on individual stories as within the bigger story as well. I'm not real big into a lot of reality TV. Yeah. Probably the only two that I like are, my wife and I would watch Big Brother. Again, that was a show we started watching, I think it's been on 15 years or more. So it's sort of we've just been watching it for a long time. And then AGT is another one. We like that, my parents watch that. So it gives us something to talk about. And yeah, that's kind of
nice. So you mentioned, Friends in The Office. I personally love both those shows. I have them both on DVD as well, because they've been taken off, whatever streaming services at this point. But, thinking back, since they were released kind of a little while ago, the humor is different now than it was back then. I still obviously find it funny. Yeah. But, do you think that those shows in particular have a diverse cast of characters?
So Friends does not. It's 3 white guys and 3 white girls. Right. They had they're diverse in personality. But I actually remember probably about 5-6 years ago having a conversation with someone who pointed out to me, and I said, I thought that was a great representation of what it was like growing up at that time. And he was like, I think it was a horrible representation because I lived in that same city where that show was shot. And he was like, that's not how I lived my reality. I think that was probably one of the first times in my life that I remember sort of having this glass shattering moment of wow, what I think is reality is different from somebody else. But the fact that he lived in the same city, that, not New York, but literally that area of New York where that show was shot, he was just people didn't sit on couches and coffee houses and, have that close, he's I'm sure somebody did, but he's that wasn't my reality. And so it just sort of changed the way. And then for The Office, I would say it's a little bit more diverse. There's some characters of color. Why am I blanking on his name now? That he's the accountant. that is gay.
Oh,
but like
Oscar.
Oscar,
yeah.
there you go. And not to say like he's the accountant that's gay,
Yeah.
but like again, and it's like sort of.
It was the punchline of a lot of the jokes.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, but it was like I don't know, like I start thinking back to like the idea of like how I just said like I identified him as first the accountant as gay and then as like all of that and like what moments of the show were like, is that what it was actually like to be a gay man working in an office setting at that time, you know, or that. So, and it's only one of a cast of characters. And so now he gets like all of the instances that come up in those questions are like filtered through one character. I don't know. I've just been kind of not prepping for, but like thinking about this interview and your project and everything has helped me to sort of like start thinking about those things and looking at them a little bit differently and looking at myself a little bit differently too.
Yeah, so now like thinking back on the fact that since they were released a little while ago, do you think it's more like you said for The Office, like it's more stereotypical, like the characters that are diverse, you know, their identity is used as like a punchline of a joke, or do you think it's more celebrated? Like what kinds of things, like upon rewatching the show however many times at this point, since it's been out a while, do you think like that has changed for you, like your perception of those characters that are different identities, or?
I think I look at them differently, like the idea that, so just take like Oscar from The Office, like he's one gay man, like, but his experience should be the full representation of all gay men or all gay people or whatever it is. And I think, I don't know, it's tough because I think sometimes I'm like, why did they make his character gay? Why did they have a female gay character? Why did they have non-binary or things like that? Like sort of, I start thinking about like, what is the motivation at that time for that character? Is it to celebrate? Is it to open people's eyes? Is it because some meeting they had in office that if we have a character that identifies as this, but like we will hit another group of, or another demographic? Because I know like the whole idea with entertainment is like, I feel like years ago, it was so much more focused on, you know, using this thing to make money, not using this thing to spread awareness. Where I think now there's still that aspect of like, if we make something, we make money.
Yeah, it's more about connecting with the audience.
Yeah, because there's so many more ways for you to do it. Like I could, like you and I could create a show and put it on YouTube that costs nothing to produce. That could be so much more like eye-opening to the experience of what it's like to be a member of a marginalized group. But like back then, did they go above and beyond what was expected at that time, or were they just meeting whatever it is? And it's not a question. I don't know if it's like a question that can really be answered, but it's thinking about it is something I definitely wasn't doing before.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're both sitcoms, so how seriously can you really take all of that? Yeah. But it's like, if you think about somebody who's a part of those minority groups, do you think they were taking things a little more seriously sometimes? Like I know people have different levels of what they get offended by, you know. So
I think is Modern Family.
Oh,
and I probably watched that show for 4 or 5 seasons before I realized that both Mitch and Cam's characters in real life are not homosexual or not gay. And then when, like, again, that was another like glass shattering moment, because like I remember saying like they play the characters so well, and it's like I feel like it's a good balance of like there's a flamboyantly gay man and Cam, and then a not as flamboyantly gay. So it's like you get to see, like I remember thinking like you get to see both sides of it. It's not just one stereotypical time, but then you realize you're like both of them aren't, and they're actually playing a character, and then there's all these levels, and like there's times where like the character who's more flamboyant becomes less, and the one who is less becomes more, and it's like, again, like I think like, oh, that's great, I'm being exposed to more, but it's like somebody somewhere is coming up with that. They're writing the lines, they're creating the scenes, and you start thinking like, well, why did they go more this way or that way or things like that? So, you know, how much of this was cleaned up to be more appropriate for network TV or something like that? So yeah.
For sure. So things like that, like characters who aren't gay playing gay characters, or you know, who are gay playing straight characters. Like, do you think that, you know, diverse versus limited representation affects how like a person would perceive themselves. So like, I'm gay. So I mean, seeing somebody in a show that's a gay character, but isn't gay in real life, do you think that maybe would like, I mean, for me at least, that maybe sometimes doesn't feel as genuine, but also like if they're a good actor, obviously it's gonna, you know, come across as something that's enjoyable to watch. But do you think that like how the characters are represented would affect a person who is part of a minority group? Like, do you think?
So it's a tough question for me to answer.
Yeah.
I feel such like a politician when I start answering that way. So I would say, I would hope that I don't know, because like, I mean, I talked about this in computer science, which is a primarily male dominated field, and how we need more women, and how I say that, you know, I know that me, a white male in his mid to late 30s, saying that only carries so much weight, but it's the idea that like, I don't know, I would feel like it would help to an extent, but like if it doesn't continue to grow and expand, and like if it just ends with the stereotypical character and there's no growth in that character over time, and you just keep seeing the same storylines and the same problems or solutions or whatever it is that come up, that it feels like you're just that. And then if you, I don't know.
No, I totally understand that. I think like the storyline evolving, like a lot of, like I think a lot of the issue with it is, at least in the past, there's been a lot of, you know, progress recently, but like the minority character, their entire character was based around that one identifying characteristic of them. The stereotypes like that. So, you know, something that would be, I guess, more personal to you. How do you think that, you know, diverse versus limited representation affects how you perceive other people of minorities? Like do you, I know obviously, you know, with The Office and Friends, it's not as recent as, you know, some shows that have come out. But do you think that like seeing a certain stereotype on TV all the time would affect your perception of people like that in real life?
100%. Yeah, I think if you're only, like, in my daily life, if I'm not exposed, or if I'm not aware that people in my life have a different lifestyle than me, or have a different experience than me, like I don't talk to them about their experiences, then it's like I'm never gonna know. And if the only way that I get exposed to people's different experiences or lifestyles, things like that, is through this vessel of like entertainment, TV and movies, things like that, and then it's like, that's gonna have so much effect on me. Like if the only time, like if the only, I know for a lot of people, like growing up, like the show Will and Grace was huge, but for a lot of people that was their only exposure to someone that was gay. And so they built up in their mind of like, this is what a gay person is, but then you realize that like, that's one person in that group. That's also a male person in that group. So what is it like for a female, a person who doesn't, you know, identify as one versus the other, things like that. And I don't know, I think it really can have a big lasting effect on just how you see them. I mean, that's how stereotypes get created. They're not created out of thin air. It's someone creates this,
perpetuating ideas that have been spread to the masses, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it really can, but it's also like, it's kind of up to people to like, the other thing part of it is like, I grew up in a house that like, you ask questions, you're like, my dad is very personal. He can't go anywhere without running into someone he knows. And like, I'm starting to see the effects of that in my life, to where I'm willing to have conversations with people, to talk to them and open. It's not that like I was brought up in a household of like, you know, you need to see people who they are, like whatever it is. It's just, you know, have conversations with people, meet people, like gain experiences that way. And so I've had the ability to like watch those shows, but then also to meet people, to sort of fill in the gaps and not just see, but I can see, like I know people in my life to where, you know, they have this one experience, they think that's what it is because that's what they saw. And so it's just very interesting going back and thinking about the shows that I've watched in my life over the years. But I do know one show that it was the show Happy Endings. I think it had like 2 seasons on ABC, and there was a character on the show, Max, who was a gay man, but he was a slob, and he was like very openly talked about like sexuality and things like that and everything. And like his gay character was completely different than any other gay character I had seen on TV before. And it was just like another like aha moment of like, yeah, that's not weird, because it's just, there's like with straight people, like
right, exactly.
There's different types of straight people. There's different, like all of that and everything. So that was a character I remember like thinking back. I'm just like, oh, okay, this is neat. And then like recently the movie Bros, watching that, and I remember like I saw it, I was like, this is great. I'm sure people who like identify as gay are like watching this, or like gay men are watching this, like, finally, this is who we really are. And then I talked to one of my friends, Michael, who's a gay man, and he was just like, no, I thought it was dumb. And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, these two beautiful men can't find love. He's like, that's ridiculous. If you're a handsome gay man, like you're gonna, and I was just like, and it was so, and like, if you agree with that statement or not, it's to the point of like, when I think as a non-member of that group of like, wow, this is the full representation, this is everything, there's still gonna be people that say, that isn't my story.
Yeah, you're never gonna get it to be perfect.
And again, like that,
everybody's so different.
And it's like, because it's one movie, and like these are one TV shows, but it's just very interesting, like getting to have those conversations where I think as a member, they did it, and then somebody out of that group was just like, no, they didn't. Like, yeah, it was nice, it was better than what we've seen, but it's just like, it's not full. And I'm sure I can find shows like Own Friends, like I'm goofy and silly. I'm like, but like I'm not Chandler Bing. Like I'm super nerdy, but I'm not Ross. Like you can find elements of all of these characters, and it's just interesting to think about it from that perspective of like, it's easier for me to be okay with that because it's like, that's been my whole life.
Of course, So you mentioned like your childhood, so you have a son. How, like what kinds of shows do you show him, or like what is he watching? How do you think that's gonna maybe affect him growing up?
So he's big into, his favorite show now is a show called Dino Dan. It's about a little kid who's in the dinosaurs, and there's Dino Dan, his little brother Trek, and then there's Dino Dana. I'm trying to think what else is he really like. He's in the Pokemon cards, I know that.
Gosh, really?
Yeah, he's really into Pokemon cards. He jumps around shows a lot. Alvin and the Chipmunks over break, he started watching that. I think the only time it comes on the mind is when we watch this, like if we watch The Little Mermaid or Aladdin, or like a lot of Disney movies that we grew up with. I think before we put it on, there is that moment of just like, hold on, let me try to remember this. Let me think through it, the lens of like, not just a kid, but as an adult, and then trying to think of it through a kid, and like, did that have an effect on me and things like that. And then, I don't know, like, you try to balance of like, I don't wanna, because the big thing with me being a librarian is the idea of like censorship.
For sure.
Is a really tough topic for me to discuss with a lot of people, because I kind of live in this world of like, we should be exposed to everything. Like that's how you learn, is you expose yourself to as much as possible. And sometimes that can mean exposing yourself to a way of thinking or a thought or an idea that you don't agree with very strongly, that you don't know anything about. And that in itself is just, that can be, it's like, that's like just human nature of like, I'm not used to this, so I'm gonna be scared of it first, kind of thing. So
and with that being so prevalent in recent times with censorship and things like that, I think that's definitely.
And so I want to be aware of that, like with my son, like I want him to be exposed to things, but I also am really aware of the idea of like, he's 6 right now, and so like there are things that are happening in his lives that are creating this foundation of like what's right and what's wrong. Like there'll be moments that come up, like we'll talk about the idea of like, if somebody has 2 dads or 2 moms, and we're just like, that's okay. Or like, can a boy kiss a boy or something like that? We're like, yeah, anybody can. Or can a boy wear a dress? Like there was a big thing where 2 years ago, he was really into Paw Patrol, and he's like, I want to dress up like Paw Patrol for Halloween. And so we said, okay, which character do you want? So we go to the store, and there is Chase the fireman. There's, Chase was the police dog, and I'm blanking on his name now for the fireman.
I know it's the bulldog, I think.
Yeah, and then there's the girl dog Sky. Well, that's his favorite character.
She's so cool.
Yeah, and so he wants to dress up as her, but like it's all of the outfits, they're all dogs.
Yeah.
But then the Sky outfit has a skirt attached to it. And we were just thinking, like, man, this would be great if it didn't have the skirt attached to it. And then I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
And like, he was like, the costume that was there, the one available, didn't fit him. So Marshall was the fire. So we went with Marshall. But it was like, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, you know, I didn't go to Amazon and try to find a different size. We didn't go to a different store. We just settled. And I'm like, is there a part of me that's sort of like we say things like, I don't want my son to wear this like pink tutu costume because he's going to be made fun of. And I'm like, but like, why did that thought, like, is that the thought that's popping in my head? Or like, am I being overprotective? Like all of these things and thoughts come in the head. And so, I don't know, it's a lot, but in the end, it's, you know, I want him to know that like, it's okay for a boy to wear pink or to wear a dress or to wear a wig. Just like it's okay for a girl to, whatever, like the stereotypes, like to play with Legos or to play with trucks or whatever it might be. Or, you know, just because you're a boy, you don't have to wear blue and you're growing up to wear pink. Like, and it's like, you're trying to instill a lot of that stuff, but then it's also like the idea of like, I just want him to do what he wants to do. And it's like, how do I give him all of the options and let him choose what feels right to him? Because ultimately that's what I want to happen without pushing it on him. Because if I'm like, no, you're a boy, you can wear pink, you should wear pink, try wearing pink.
Yeah, don't,
so you know, then you end up going too far the other way. And that kind of comes back to the idea with the TV shows of just like, how much is too much and how much is not enough, and like who's making that gauge and deciding what's right or wrong. And
and then it comes down to, like you said, like trying to force it. Like I know like a lot of people in creating TV shows, like the term queer baiting has been thrown around of people trying to use it to gain publicity from minority communities. That's been such a prevalent issue as well recently. So I think it's really important to definitely touch on that. And also like with your son, do you think like if you, for instance, when you were younger, watched shows that he watches now, kinds of things that have more, you know, a wide range of characters and different experiences, do you think that would have changed how you grew up a little bit, or like how you perceived people of other minorities if you were watching shows when you were younger that had like a better representation of minority communities?
100%. Yeah, I think it's just the exposure part to it. Like I started thinking back to shows when I watched when I was a kid, and like shows that like probably helped me to see like more than just my own group. Like I think of like the show Doug. It was animated. Each of the characters was a different color. And like at the time, you don't think anything of it. But of course the main character is a white male, and then like the girl that he likes is orange, and his best friend is blue, and his like the main character that is like his like nemesis in the show is green. And like so like each character is a different color. And like I think back now, I'm just like, I didn't think anything of it, but I'm sure somebody made a conscious thought of like, we could have made all these characters the same color, but we're gonna make each one, and I'm sure each of the colors represented something that I wasn't able to comprehend. Or like one of my favorite shows growing up was Hey Arnold. So like the main character is white, his best friend is black, and they live in the city, and like each of the characters on the show, or most of the characters on the show, are white, but it's like, and it's an animated show, but like each of the shape of the character is different. And so they don't all look the same. And it's like, at the time, I don't think that like I was sitting there as like a 10, 11
kid is thinking,
you're like, wow,
that,
this is great, and you know, I'm exposed to all these different things, and people can be different. But like I think back now, I'm just like, that probably played a role, and probably the shows that like the generation before me watched were a little less of that. And now, so like for example, like the show my son watches, Dido Data. The girl, she comes from a family, I would say like probably, I don't want to say like Middle Eastern, but like they are not white. And so like just the fact of that, my son's being, and so he starts asking questions about like color, like, you know, what does it mean if someone says that they're brown skin or black skin or this or that and everything. And it's like, those aren't conversations. I didn't ask those questions, or at least I don't remember them.
He's being exposed to it already.
Exactly. And that's the idea of like the exposure piece to it. So but then of course, like you battle with like, is it the right exposure? Is it the right amount of, is it too much?
And that just comes down to educating yourself and being, you know, just aware of what's going on. And also, and like with the kids, like obviously when you were a kid, you weren't thinking about, oh wow, there's this character that's like this, and like you weren't like, you know, kids are not like that. So
Correct.
It really comes down to like the parents being educated and also just being conscious of what they're exposing their children to, because I feel like that's, you know, a huge responsibility as a parent in general. So I mean, yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. So last question here to wrap up. So what changes do you think you would like to see regarding, if any, you know, regarding diverse representation?
I think like, and this is something I haven't looked a lot into, but I feel like it's not, I don't know if it's so much like the people that we see on the screen. I think it's more important the people behind the screen, the people that are writing, the people that are producing, the people that are determining like this is too much of this or this is not enough of that. Like there needs to be, and I don't want to say more diversity because I'll be honest, like I'm not as well like educated in the idea of like who, like when you see those names at the end of a show, like I don't look up who those people are. I don't know who they are. They're just names to me. But like, you would think that like, if you have more diversity in those spaces, you're going to have more authentic experiences on the screen. So as important as it is to have, you know, more characters, marginalized groups in more media, it's the idea of like the people behind the camera having influence on what the people on the camera are doing, are saying, their experiences, their stories. I think like I would love to see more of that because I think that's just gonna make things better. Because I think back to like, you know, if I get in a situation where I feel uneasy or I just feel like out of my depth or things like that, I think a big part of it is because I wasn't exposed to I just wasn't exposed to that kind of stuff. And so it becomes that human nature of like, I don't know this, so I'm going to like shy away from it. Or I'm going to be like, this doesn't feel right. And if something doesn't feel right, then it's probably wrong. And so I'm going to have a negative feeling towards this. And so when in my life, I'm getting in those situations, like you just have that subconscious that sort of takes over, but it's like, if I just continually sit back and let my subconscious kind of rule how I feel about things, I'm like, I need to be proactive. And so like, that's why I try to, you know, read diverse books and like be more conscious of the shows that I'm watching and not watching and like thinking about with my son, like what he's watching and not watching. Because the hardest part is like when he comes up and has questions and I'm like, I don't know, like for example, like they said, he had a classmate whose family is from India and he was just like, oh, are they black? And I'm like, I know. He goes, well, how come? Like their skin is brown and one of my other classmates' skin is brown and he said he's black. And I was just like, I remember in that moment, I was just like, I don't know how to answer this because I don't know. I haven't been exposed to that situation of this or that. And then I just go off of what I know. And so what I know becomes what he knows. And then all of that sort of thing. So it's a tough situation sometimes, but I've been trying more to like have the conversation because I think that's
the first step. That's the first step.
And being okay with like I'm on camera right now saying things like brown and black. I'm just like, did I say? But I'm literally in my mind going, did I say that right? Because it's on camera. Is somebody gonna watch this?